We have a quorum, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I call the meeting for March 21st, 2023 of the City of Kenmore Planning Commission to order. First item on the agenda is the public comments. We welcome our community members to the Planning Commission's meeting. In this forum, the Planning Commission does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the Planning Commission is to listen. We will hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you are present, please sign in. If you are online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the chair and the city planning commissioners. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Due to time constraints and to provide fair time to all community members, we must limit each speaker to 3 minutes. We will not split your time with others or reset your time. Please state your name and city of residence for the record when you come up. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the Planning Commission or the clerk in advance. Materials submitted after the meeting will be provided to the commission and will be part of the record. This meeting is being recorded and we appreciate you for taking your time to express your comments. I do not see anyone present in the room, so we'll go to the Zoom.
At this point, we don't have anybody with a raised hand online.
All right, so we will go to the next item of business. I don't have an up-to-date agenda in front of me. Do we have approval of minutes? Okay, we will go to the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Are there any objections or discussion on the minutes from the last meeting? Hearing none, it's so ordered that the minutes of the last meeting are adopted by unanimous consent. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Richard Sawyer, who is our Environmental Services Director for the City of Kenmore. Welcome to the Planning Commission. Now, I hope you didn't talk to Lori about how she feels about the, talking to the Planning Commission in open meetings, but we have to really work on her because we only have her. This is our last meeting, I think we have with her. Oh, Lori, you can't leave. Okay. Even Richard does not want your job. So no, that's the city council. I'm sorry. And then the party is afterwards at Derek's place. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming and thank you for taking the time to explain in detail our climate action plan. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, good evening, commissioners, and it is a pleasure to be here this evening with you all. And while we're getting situated with our, got some consultants joining us tonight, I'll go ahead and start with an introduction. So this evening, we are here to kind of provide a summary of the city's climate action plan. We have a presentation where we'll kind of walk through all the major milestones and steps that were taken as we were developing the plan through adoption and and then go into next steps. And at the end, or throughout the presentation, if you have questions, we're here to dive into any particular parts of the plan that you'd like more information on. But what our hope is that one of the actions identified in the climate action plan is to develop a climate action element, which will be a new element in the city's comprehensive plan. And so we've received a grant from the Department of Commerce to do this task. And so we have been using that grant. We hired Cascadia Consulting Group, and you'll meet a few members of that team in just a moment, to prepare this element. And we'll our first meeting presenting the draft element to you will be next month. But we thought we would take this opportunity to just really dive into the climate action plan itself, so that if there are any questions with the plan, we can get those out of the way. And then when we come back next month, we can just dive right into having a conversation about this new draft element that we're putting together for your review. All right, well, with that being said, again, I'm Richard Sawyer. I'm the Environmental Services Director for the city. And then I'll just go ahead and let the team introduce themselves. I'll start with Sammy.
You know me, I'm Sammy Ruin. I am the admin specialist for the Environmental Services Group.
Great, and I think we've got some of our colleagues with Cascadia Consulting Group virtually here. If you can introduce yourselves.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks so much for having us tonight. Gretchen Muller with Cascadia Consulting Group, and I'm the director of our planning and facilitation line of business. And I'm joined by Nicole. Nicole, want to introduce yourself next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Gutierrez. I'm managing the project on the Cascadia end of things for the Comprehensive Plan Climate Element. And I'll hand it off to you, Haley, to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Weinberg, and I am an associate with Cascadia, and I'm here to provide a little bit of insight into the greenhouse gas inventory if there are any questions.
Excellent. And one thing I forgot to mention, Cascadia Consulting Group is both the consultant that we are utilizing to develop the comprehensive plan element. They were also the consultant that we used to develop the climate action plan as well. So they're very familiar with both these processes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gretchen, and we can start with the presentation.
Excellent. And I know just let us know when it's being projected. Okay, perfect. Great. So I'm going to walk through a few of these slides. And as Richard mentioned, if there are any questions, points of clarification throughout the course of these few slides here that we have for you all, please feel free to ask them, and we'll make sure to respond to them. And Richard and Sammy, if you can just let us know, since you all are in the room together, if any questions are coming up as we go along, that would be really helpful as well. So thank you all so much for having us. As I mentioned, Gretchen Muller, and I'm joined by both Nicole and Haley. And we're going to be walking through the kind of reorienting you all to the climate action plan, walking through the various different strategies and action development process, the various outcomes, and really how we got there. So I'll do a deep dive into the, or somewhat of a deep dive into the emissions forecast and reductions targets, also the vulnerability assessment, the community engagement that went into the climate action plan. Then we'll talk through the climate action plan next steps, right? What happened post the plan was adopted spring of last year. And as Nicole mentioned, as Richard mentioned, the new phase of this project and one of the action items from the climate action plan was this climate action element, which is what we're working on right now. And so covering each of those things, and here are a few of the key elements of the Kenmore Climate Action Plan. It was adopted by City Council in May of 2022. It laid out a total of 46 total actions across 16 strategies and 6 focus areas, and I'll get into a little more detail in a few slides here related to those. And the strategies and actions really came from and resulted from the greenhouse gas inventory, which we'll be walking through in a couple of slides from now, as well as the vulnerability assessment work that our team did last year, and a very robust both internal engagement process as well as external community engagement process too. And we've got a couple of slides for each of these key elements that then fed into the strategies and actions which were captured in that plan. So now I'm going to walk through the CAP development process and those key elements that I just mentioned previously. So we completed a 2019 community-wide greenhouse gas inventory to use as Kenmore's baseline data. And these inventories include emissions that could be reliably estimated, calculated using best available data, as well as the standard methodology outlined in the U.S. Community Protocol. And the inventory that you're seeing here shows us that in 2019, the majority of community emissions come from energy consumption. So that includes both electricity and natural gas. Transportation made up 31% of emissions, and refrigerants and solid waste represented about 9% of those community emissions. And by completing a greenhouse gas inventory, the city really could use this data to best understand where the community emissions were coming from and think about how to reduce them. So really using this output from those efforts to help inform the strategies and actions which were later developed. And this slide here is showing you that we've scaled your data through 2050, assuming that emissions will increase as the population, as number of jobs, housing units in the city continues to grow as well. And so this is what's called a wedge analysis. And while the greenhouse gas inventory quantifies emissions occurring within the city's geographic boundaries from various different activities, providing a really current snapshot of the city's emissions, this graphic here that you're looking at right now is a wedge analysis, and it illustrates how emissions are projected to change into the future when incorporating population growth over time. So the black top line that you see at the top of that wedge represents a business as usual scenario, and this is Kenmore's projected emissions if no emissions reductions efforts were taken. As you can see in that scenario, we expect a significant increase in emissions. The gray line that you see or the gray area rather, that big portion of the wedge there that you see there represents adjusted business as usual scenario. And this is Kenmore's projected emissions if only federal, state, and regional policies like the Washington Energy Code, the Washington Clean Energy Transformation Act, as well as federal vehicle regulations. And there are a number of different policies that are happening and influencing both at a federal level, state level, and a regional level. And that gray area is represents that, and if they were to be implemented. And then the teal, I'm not sure what color, it should correct me if the color is showing up in a different way. For me, it's like teal, green, and that wedge represents King County's emissions reduction targets of meeting that 50, 75%, and 95% emissions reductions by 2030, 2040, and 2050, respectively, and compared to that 2007 baseline. So the teal green wedge represents the emissions that will be needed to be reduced through local regulations, policies, or actions. So that teal wedge there is really the piece that the strategies and actions that were identified in the climate action plan. It was eye on the prize in terms of really addressing that green portion. How do we get the city through additional strategies and actions to make up that green portion of the wedge there? Great. And another key element that I previously mentioned was the vulnerability assessment. So we did the greenhouse gas inventory, we did a wedge analysis, and then another really key piece before developing the strategies and actions was this vulnerability assessment. And we conducted this vulnerability assessment to assess risk associated with climate change and natural and human systems. And this slide captures the key elements of the assessment. And this assessment, again, was one of those key pieces that helped inform the development of the strategies and actions list that you'll see in your adopted climate action plan. And some examples of this as they translate into actual actions. So things like grid resilience, tree canopy to mitigate heat island effect, protection of water bodies, natural areas that can support natural systems and their ecosystem benefits. And the plan also, your plan also includes a whole section on community resilience. And so that's how these pieces and this particular element of work that our team did alongside Richard and Sammy resulted in or showed up in your climate action plan. The other third leg of that stool was really the engagement piece. And there was robust engagement both internally with staff, council, and others, as well as externally with the general public. And the slide captures each of the key elements to that feedback. And you'll also see on that bottom bar there that engagement happened in these three main phases. And each of these buckets capture what type of what type of input feedback was solicited in each phase. So for example, for that first phase, really looking and how it kind of lines up with other work that we did. So that first phase, we conducted a survey. We had over 2,000 responses, which is actually a really impressive response rate from your community. We held 2 virtual forums. We solicited really direct and pointed feedback from city staff. Went to 7 different council meetings, so really making sure that council was providing feedback and input at each key milestone of the project along the way, and had a pop-up event as well as an online open house. So each of these pieces folded into the final result of that final climate action plan. So this now moving into the strategies and actions. So those were all the steps that were taken to get us to the list of strategies and actions that are captured in your climate action plan. And this slide shows the 6. I've talked about the focus areas. So all of the actions that we have in your climate action plan are under one of these 6 buckets. So these are your focus areas. So municipal operations. We have a bucket on buildings and energy and associated actions with those, a bucket on transportation and land use, associated actions with those, as well as consumption and materials management, natural systems and water resources. And the final bucket is community resilience and well-being. And across the board, across each of these 6 focus areas, the strategies and actions all aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as increase infrastructure and community resilience to climate impacts. Another really key piece of this was as a first step in generating strategies and actions, you go big, right? You do brainstorm sessions and everybody is, filling out and coming up with ideas. How are we going to tackle that? And going back to that wedge analysis, that green piece, how are we going to make up that ground? And so a really important step is prioritizing, right? Recognizing that there are only so many city staff, there are only so many resources that at this important piece in the climate action plan really needing to prioritize. Where are we really going to focus our efforts? And so what we call it in climate action planning speak is a multi-criteria analysis. And so our project team conducted alongside Sammy and Richard a prioritization process that we call multi-criteria analysis. And basically gave each of the actions in a long list of actions that were initially generated a score based on impact, feasibility, equity, community support, and co-benefits. And so that multi-criteria analysis then really helped to inform what were the top actions that really rose to the top that were part of those ultimate 46 actions that are found in your climate action plan. The climate action plan also included an implementation roadmap. And one of the very exciting things is that many of the actions are already being implemented. And so this plan had legs and is in process. Several of the actions are in process in terms of implementation. So next steps, recognizing that climate action plan was adopted by council in May of last year. Several of the actions are in process of being implemented. And as Richard mentioned, one of the key pieces, one of the actions in there was development of a climate action element. And so our team is in the process of working with city staff on this climate action element. And so you'll see here just a couple of key pieces of that. We're developing the climate action element that will be included in the 2024 comprehensive plan update. Go to the next slide, please. Here's just a little bit of background, because recognizing that a climate element isn't necessarily something that we hear every day. So this slide is really to capture what are the core pieces of what a climate element is. And so House Bill 1181 is something that's going through the legislature right now. And it's likely that this is has potential to pass and provide direction that comprehensive planning will need to be and will be a requirement in terms of integrating a climate element into this next climate action, or into this next phase of your comprehensive planning. So Kenmore is really getting ahead of that, which is really, really exciting that Kenmore is ahead of the curve. And what will be included in this deliverable? Further planning and implementation guidance beyond the climate action plan. So taking the climate action plan a big step forward. It'll also provide goals, objectives, policies to integrate into the city's long-term planning efforts. So building onto existing policies, excuse me, as well as suggesting new actions. And then another really core element of a climate action plan will be language and a format of this final deliverable that will be easily integrated into other planning elements and policy items as well. So here is a timeline. This is a fast and furious project. It started in January. It ends at the end of June. So lots of things happening. And so this timeline really captures each of those core pieces and the project milestones associated with the final draft climate action element, which will be drafted. This is the big circle at the end and our North Star here, June 15th. And as Richard mentioned, coming back to you all at a couple of key additional touch points along this roadmap. Which is a great segue into this final slide before we open it up to any clarifying questions as well as reflections, thoughts that you all would like to share. So we've got 2 additional touch points, that April touch point and early June. And so we'll be gathering in April, gathering feedback on the preliminary climate action element goals, the objectives and policies. And then in early June, we'll have a final draft for you all to react to and provide input on. And that's my final slide, recognizing that we covered a lot of ground, about over a year and a half of project work. So with that, looking forward to opening it up for questions and discussion.
Thanks, Gretchen. And one thing I just wanted to add quickly that wasn't in the presentation, but is kind of a current development. Obviously implementing the climate action plan it takes staff and resources, which we were very short supply of. So concurrently with the city's budget development late last year into early this year, we were also concurrently trying to find a way to secure funding for a climate action program manager. And we kind of put it together as a package with a housing and human services manager as well, so we could kind of tackle this 2 of the city council's top priorities to get some staffing and resources for those, to implement those priorities. And so I'm happy to say that we're actually currently in the process of recruiting the climate action program manager, and hopefully you will see a new face, maybe even by the next meeting, and so we'll have some extra help with this effort as well. So, but with that being said, yeah, I'd like to open up for questions.
You said that position was combined with what other position?
It's 2 positions. We kind of combined them as a package as we presented it to City Council and secured funding. So the funding that we secured and we're able to move forward with actually provides 2 positions. So one will be the Housing and Human Services Manager, and one will be a Climate Action Program Manager.
Richard, how big is the climate action team? Like, how big is it going to be in terms of just kind of implementing this program? It's a long-term vision, right? And so do you have enough help? Is there enough people to obviously assist you in this vision that we have?
No, but we're very resourceful. I mean, getting this manager is going to be a huge first step so that we can have someone dedicated to, really working day in, day out on these actions. We can start looking for grants. We can start tackling low-hanging fruit.
Full-time positions, correct?
Yeah, so that's a full-time position. Sammy spends quite a bit of her time working on this, myself, but it really touches all departments. And so it's going to be a team effort. I mean, we're bringing on a new fleets and facilities manager. So a lot of city operations are impacted by these climate actions that were in the plan. In fact, I don't think I can think of a department that's not really impacted and needing to find resources to help with this.
Are there other questions from the commissioners?
I've got a few questions too.
Go ahead, Sam.
Question, Haley, Nicole, thank you very much for being here. Can you guys tell us a little bit about the Cascadia Consulting Group? I had a chance to look at your website before coming here today, and I was very impressed by your just company and just your experience as far as have you guys been working with other cities as well, or is it just Kenmore? Just a little bit about your company would be great.
Yeah,
Great
great
consulting group.
question. Yeah, and realize that we didn't have a who is Cascadia at the beginning of this presentation, so I appreciate the question. And Nicole and Haley, feel free to jump in here. So Cascadia Consulting Group, we actually are celebrating our 30th birthday on April 20th. And so we've been around for a long time. We're a Seattle-based company, have our home office in Seattle, also have an office in Oakland, and we're made up of, we've been growing quite a bit, but about 90 people, and have been working in the sustainability space for our entire time as a company, and in the climate action planning space for probably 12 or more years, but we would probably say that sustainability planning was early climate action planning. And we've been doing climate action planning throughout the region. And I don't know, Haley, if you have a number of climate action plans that we've done, but we've done many throughout King County, throughout Snohomish County, and some in California as well. I would say the majority of our climate action plans, we've done one in Colorado. We've done a few kind of around the country, but have really focused our efforts on our home territory here in the Puget Sound region. And a women-owned company as well. I don't know, Nicole and Haley, if there's anything more on the Cascadia side of things.
I think you covered it very well, Gretchen. One thing I would maybe tag Haley to talk about is just how we approach the cap. We have the greenhouse gas inventory and technical ability, as well as, the planning approach that we also bring to the table and experience. So Haley, if you wanted to just provide an overview of kind of the multitude of angles we bring to climate action planning. You're well steeped in greenhouse gas inventories.
Absolutely. So one thing that I really appreciate about Cascadia is our approach. We tend to come at climate action planning processes from all sides, not only from a technical aspect where we'll do a greenhouse gas inventory and forecast future emissions, but also getting community input and having folks on our team who have backgrounds in research. And one of the things that is really beneficial to our process is that we work with other cities and jurisdictions throughout the region, and we have that regional context and knowledge that helps us approach this from a way that we know has historically worked and is kind of tried and true to the region.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Lucis.
Yeah, thank you all very much this evening. It was a phenomenal presentation, great introduction. My question is for Richard here about the consultants here with us this evening, if you guys are able to jump in as well. But for the element itself, the climate action element, we've looked at here the cap that's already been approved and adopted. What is the element going to look like? How's it going to be different? Can you give us like maybe a little more of a preview on what's coming up and how it sort of differs from the cap itself? Or if it doesn't, is it going to be essentially cap converted into an element form?
That's a great question, and I can provide kind of a non-planner layman's response first and then hand it over to Gretchen. But
Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Sorry
The
about that.
reinforcements are here.
Sorry.
You asked them a hard question. Now you got the big wigs coming.
Oh, wow.
Oh, you asked,
No,
you
it's-
asked Richard a planning question. So
Okay,
we-
okay.
It's a great question because I went straight to Debbie's office and asked the same question. You know, I'm more of a technical surface water background kind of guy.
Yeah.
But should I even provide, or should I just hand it over?
Well, I'll put you out to your misery, Richard. So
A few minutes of this.
So the climate action, element, and it was mentioned in the presentation, there's likely going to be some state guidance on this that we will need to follow, but it's also an implementation measure. So this will look like the other elements that you see in the comprehensive plan. There'll be a background section giving the data, and then there'll be goals, policies, and objectives, and then implementation strategies. So the format will be the same. So for those of you who worked on the parks element, where we have a separate park recreation open space plan, we pulled things from that plan and put them in the comprehensive plan. So we're pulling, same thing for the CAP, we're pulling information that was prepared for the CAP, whether it's background data from that CAP into the comprehensive plan, and then using the information from the CAP to develop those goals, policies, and objectives. So we're not reopening the CAP because that has been adopted, but we're using that to prepare the element.
So nothing crazy or new with this. It's just sort of putting it into a comprehensive plan, sort of language and structure.
Yes, and I said, well, I don't know, it could be crazy, but
Okay.
hopefully not too crazy.
Thank you. for
So
that.
is Cascadia still working on this plan as well? Because I've got questions. For
Yes.
example, page 9 and 10 of the presentation that was sent to us prior to this meeting, community engagement. There were about 2,200 people that responded back to surveys. Population of Kenmore, I think, is about 24,000 people when I last looked at it. Is there any way we can get more community engagements for more people to be able to give their opinions on this plan? Is that something that Cascadia works on to help us out? Because I think community engagement is very important for residents of Kenmore to be involved in this. So is there anything that could possibly be out there to get more people involved in this plan that we have? I don't know if that was a question or if that was just a comment.
Well, yeah, I can provide a short answer and then hand it over to Sammy. But yeah, the engagement efforts and actually working with Cascadia were, I mean, we spent a lot of time focusing on that. And for instance, those survey responses, a typical survey, if we can get between 300 and 400, that's considered significant. And we can use that to make decisions. So, I mean, being in the thousands is just, I mean, that's amazing response from the community. And, but we can always improve. And just last week, I actually provided the same presentation to the city's DEIA task force and got some great feedback from that group. And our DEIA consultant actually provided, hey, here's even more organizations that you can reach out to. And on top of what we already did, which I can hand over to Sammy, who did a phenomenal job, just, really going out into the community.
To piggyback on Richard's response, we definitely spent a good chunk of time trying to connect and engage within the community. We also tried to ensure that we had local leaders within the group to come to the table and participate in a meaningful way. And we also had residents, we had church leaders that participated in our engagement. We attempted to try to reach a broad and just a variety of community members within the city and allowed people to come to the participate in the engagement that we engagement opportunities that we set up so that every voice could be heard as much as every other voice that would be heard. So. And we do plan, with this element, we do plan on continuing with our robust engagement strategies. However, we are anticipating our climate action program manager to come on board, and hopefully they'll hit the ground running and, take the baton from where we started with the CAP engagement and apply it to the climate action element so that we can continue engaging with the community and ensuring that those voices are heard, and especially with our DIA group and their recommendations for additional groups for us to stay in contact with, we can increase the amount of engagement that we'll have within the community.
One last thing I'll say is this entire climate action plan obviously is for us to protect our city or community or world. Is there any engagement with the youth? Because obviously it's, we'll be gone 10, 20, 30 years or whatnot, but is there any engagement with high school students, junior high school? I mean, that's something that I think is important to get the youth involved in this plan.
That was part of my intention. We connected with North Shore teachers. And so we had, during our climate action plan engagement, we had an elementary school teacher and we had a middle school teacher. And the high school teacher, science teacher that was slated to participate wasn't able to last minute. So I tried to engage with as many students and teachers to participate as we could. And sometimes scheduling doesn't work. And we also gave community members the opportunity to participate just by email, with comments if they did. And we try to factor that in as well. And so that is a priority. And that's something that we kept at the forefront of our engagement efforts as well, to ensure that as we move forward with these actions, that we would be engaging with youth so that they could model some of the actions that we're hoping to implement and continue those efforts for longer periods, and we'll be around and implementing the climate action plan.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lucis.
Yeah, so the slide on synergies, at least in the handout, slide on synergies with other city plans, as well as the presentation slide on impacts to the community, that brought up a big question for me, and that is, what is the city doing to address those sorts of things as they come about and as they increase? With the cap right now, I'll rephrase it, don't worry, I see some confusion on some of your faces, but with the cap itself, it's certainly geared towards reducing greenhouse gases and future impacts and things like that, a more proactive approach. But sort of in the meantime, are there structures or frameworks within city departments on how to address some of those impacts as they come up? Because looking at the projection, we won't hit that 95% until 2050. So there's still going to be changes and stuff coming along. Is that handled by each department respectively, or is there going to be maybe a section in the element that's more of a near term or physical sort of response to actual impacts of climate change within Kenmore?
I guess just trying to process exactly what the question is. Because I'm hearing a couple things in your questions. It sounds like, one, operationally, what are we doing kind of near term, long term to implement? And then it sounds like some of your question was also kind of like, moving forward, there's still impacts happening and, that we can't avoid.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's kind of, so what's the plan for those? Is that?
Well, since we're talking about more now the comprehensive element of it, which is certainly more objective based and policy based. Yeah, my question is sort of, when it comes to the element, will there be a section, or is it appropriate to have a section that discusses more short-term or actual impacts of climate change in the community and how the city's going to respond to those? Which in my mind is a little bit different than some of these policies, which are to prevent greenhouse gases, to prevent those impacts. But with those impacts that may already be occurring, as was discussed, and the potential at least, is there a plan or a structure or framework for addressing those more in a responsive way rather than a proactive way, to, in addition to the proactive way, excuse me?
I think it's possible that Commissioner Lutz is asking about mitigation and resiliency. So
thank you, Lori. Those are the words I was looking for.
So we might talk a little bit. In fact, even the consultant might have some thoughts about resiliency, which is something which is supposed to be included, I think, in the
Wonderful.
climate element.
I apologize for my long-winded
I was-
description.
I was struggling for the word as well. That's the what I was also trying.
That's
um,
it. That's it.
I can
Yes.
speak very briefly in the climate action plan that is actually addressed in that last section where we try and come up with actions to address some of those resiliency and community impacts that we know are happening. But I can turn it over to Gretchen, who probably has a little bit more to say on what might be included in the element.
Yeah.
You want to speak to that?
Sure, and I may actually invite Nicole to come in and address that directly. But the vulnerability assessment is a big piece of that. So Nicole?
Thanks, Gretchen. Yeah, what I'll add, something with the climate element that will be distinct and different than the CAP and really builds upon that community resilience and well-being focus area is that there's Department of Commerce guidance that identifies 11 priority sectors. So that includes things like transportation, buildings and energy, human health, emergency management, et cetera, et cetera. And right now in the guidance that will be published, I think sometime in late spring, they're requiring resilience policies and goals under each of those priority sectors. So I think what we can expect is we would pull, well, what we're doing is a policy audit and including the CAP in that policy audit, crosswalking various other Kenmore plans and pulling out what are resilience actions already identified that we can supplement or strengthen within a climate element or expand upon if there's a gap identified. So to fulfill the requirements as outlined in the guidance, I think what you can expect to see is more resilience strategies, policies, objectives, goals coming in to the fray.
That's great to hear. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
And just one thing to piggyback on that. So even though the guidance hasn't yet been published, our team is actually working on that project and on that guidance with Department of Commerce. And so we have our finger on the pulse in terms of where that guidance is headed and are able to pull that in even before it's published.
Thank you very much. Are there any other?
Quick question.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at page 13 of the presentation here, and again, these numbers are from 2019. That's pre-COVID. I asked this question last time in our meeting as well. Are these numbers from 2019 still the same post-COVID? Because I know things have changed quite a bit. So I just wanted to know a little bit about whether you guys have discovered that the numbers are still the same. And so if that's the case, then 2019 numbers make sense. But if it's changed a little bit, then that might need to be updated.
Yes, and I'm going to invite Haley to answer that question.
Yeah, just to clarify in reference to the greenhouse gas inventory, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so we would expect that the numbers have gone up with population and job changes and things like that over the past few years. We have not done an updated count, and that's something that we might recommend into the future. But these 2019 numbers are likely still pretty accurate, but again, have likely increased and changed over time, just slightly.
Thank you.
And I can just add to that greenhouse gas inventory as part of the climate action. We've identified updates every 2 years. So as soon as we have the resources on board, we would go back and calculate 21, and then next year calculate 23, and then provide those updates every other year.
So when you say resources on board, you mean your director?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure if you needed more money from the city council or not. Okay, we can't provide any money at this level. It's over our pay grade. So, any other questions from the commissioners?
Yeah.
Yes, Derek, go ahead.
So this is along the lines of Commissioner Lutz's question, I guess. I have two questions. The first one is to Richard, I guess, maybe. What do you feel the preparedness is for the city currently, and do you feel like you guys have a plan to bring on board enough resources to make sure that a plan like this becomes easily integrated into the culture of the city departments? And like you said, it's going to touch basically every department. Is that something that's going to be achievable? Is it something that you're worried about? Is this something that we can help push, pull, whatever? My concern is that we spend a lot of effort, and clearly Cascadia is putting forth a lot of resources on this and research to prevent it from becoming a giant binder on the shelf, and to make sure that it does become a change in culture. What is your feeling on that right now? Are we in the right direction? And do you think the resources are being freed up for that?
Yes, I think, City Council has really been one of the driving forces for this. This started in 2019. It was a push from them to conduct that greenhouse gas inventory. There was a push from council members, get the city joined with K4C. So that's a big regional collaboration with King County. So I think it's King County Cities Climate Collaboration, K and 4Cs. Which again, I think Cascadia Group, I think they have their fingers all over that too, and they're a great resource for that group as well. And then, pushing this climate action plan forward and getting it complete. And then it's also the City Council's #1 priority. So, they've met for a couple years in a row and pushed this to the top of their agenda to get it going. And then, working internally, this is always being discussed, and even like this process, we're having opportunities again to meet and with all the different departments and have conversations about kind of what's coming and what we need to start doing to prepare. The community feedback at council meetings has been very supportive of this measure. I mentioned we secured the additional funding to hire this climate action program manager, and it also actually includes some funds for getting these programs started, and then hopefully going out and finding grants and other resources that we can leverage with some of the funds that the City Council secured for us. But when we we put a few ordinance forward and to increase some local taxing, and there was very little pushback. The community actually came and they seemed very supportive. This is something that I'm very willing to pay for to get this agenda move forward. In fact, some of them were just saying, like, can we do more? There's to get this done quicker. So yeah, to answer your question, I think we're definitely moving in the right direction, and that really is because it's council's making it a priority, the leadership team at the city is making it a priority, and that's trickles all the way down. So
My other question was to the Cascadia Consulting Group, and I don't want you to throw any of our friendly neighbor cities under the bus or anything, but as you've done these programs with other places, other cities, other regions, what are the success rates you're seeing, or the challenge rates? Like we're all trying to achieve the best possible goals. We're trying to reach as far as we can to do the most we can with these programs. But what are the success patterns you're seeing, or what are they traditionally hitting targets, or are they traditionally falling short? Are you guys learning through these processes as well that, hey, maybe we can't reach quite that high, or we need to make more adjustments? What are you seeing in the field from actual real life results?
That's a great question. And Haley, feel free to jump in here too, because Haley's closest to the data pieces. It's quite variable, I would say. We're having the luxury or the opportunity to work with some kind of next gen climate action plans. So the city of Renton, as well as the city of Shoreline, we just helped them with their second version of the climate action planning process. So they did something in 2011. I can't remember the first effort for the city of Shoreline. But so in some cases, some jurisdictions have been at this, neighboring cities have been at this for a while, and have really had a strong commitment in place for a long time. And the data shows that. For other jurisdictions, this Commerce just released grant funding, and I know this is grant funded through Commerce as well, for some jurisdictions that are just having an opportunity now, or taking the opportunity through this Commerce funding to do their first climate action plan. And so I would say throughout the region, it is really variable, but and then how we have a really strong commitment to creating implementable plans. So plans that have legs and that are adaptively managed along the way. So they're not considered like static documents. Obviously, things need to be adaptively managed along the way to stay relevant, but that these plans are set up in a way that they can be easily implemented, and that the actions have owners and legs to move forward. So from and I'll turn to Haley to speak to some of the data points, but I would say really across the board, but knowing that many jurisdictions throughout this region in particular are very committed to this, and putting a lot of time and resources into making real change.
Absolutely, and I'll follow that up with talking about successes and challenges. It's a really interesting thing to think about when you're thinking about greenhouse gas emissions, because there's kind of the balance beam of what's voluntary and what's mandatory, noting that so much of emissions come from the community, whether that be from day-to-day driving or what type of energy is used to power homes. So it's a really fine balance between trying to meet these targets, but also noting that you can't just require everybody to stop driving 100%, and finding the actions that are implemented that will help people transition to, activities that have a smaller footprint, or within the city, operations that have a lower footprint and things like that. It's a tough balance to find, but I think there's been a lot of success regionally, as well as challenges. So definitely can learn a lot from other jurisdictions.
And that's why it's really exciting that the city of Kenmore has goals and targets. So there's something to measure against. And so I think Kenmore is really set up well to be tracking and then saying, oh gosh, like we're not where we wanted to be, or we are where we wanted to be in certain focus areas and maybe not in others. And so to Haley's point, taking another look at those actions, maybe some of them were voluntary and we need to move the lever to do more versus, so adaptively managing is a really critical piece.
Are there any further questions from commissioners?
One thing that I'll just definitely for us to keep in mind, I'm very proud of Kenmore being in the forefront and being forward thinking with this climate action plan. The entire concept of the CAP is to preserve and protect your community. One thing that I will say to the consultants and obviously the city is just to kind of keep in mind to get the perspective of the younger generation and educate people, educate not just the younger generation, but also us. So I think that's very important to constantly just remind people, minimize electricity, energy use, conserve water, recycle. These are constant reminders that I think will go a long ways as we move ahead. So thank you very much. And I'm very proud of Kenmore and Cascadia's work as well. Thank you.
Well, the commission would like to thank Cascadia Consulting, Gretchen and Haley and Nicole for coming out tonight. It's been great. You've provided a lot of substantive and important information. We look forward to working with you to get this out of public hearing and on back to the city council. So, Richard and Sammy, thank you for coming tonight. And is there any closing comments wisdom that you'd like to leave with us, Richard?
No, we're just, we're excited to bring you this draft element next month and look forward to meeting with you then and getting your input and feedback.
Thank you very much. So Debbie, when are we scheduled for public hearing on this? If you had your choice.
If I had my choice.
You usually do. Now that
Okay.
Debbie's.
Well, if I was
not
queen
around.
for the day, you mean? So I think that the draft will be brought forward to you on April 18th for your first review. And then it will be brought back on the 5th if you haven't gone through it or if there are additional questions. So those are the immediate dates. And then depending on if you feel that's ready to go, then Laurie, I don't remember what we targeted for the date.
Yeah, tentatively, the hearing would be in June.
Okay. And that's with a couple
So,
other
and
elements.
we
right?
have to confirm that with
Yeah.
Possibly.
Richard and the consultants, so.
So the reason that we're working on this right now is Gretchen mentioned that the city received a grant from the Department of Commerce, which goes through mid-June. So that's why we're trying to wrap this up and use the consultant's time wisely between now and June.
Thank you very much. All right, so we'll move on to our next part of the agenda. You're all
Thank you.
done. Lori, you get to stay there. Let's, now Debbie, did you want to have at us before we have at Lori?
It's your agenda. So we've got through the business item. I'm going to turn it over to you. This is your agenda.
Okay. Laura, I can't believe this is the last planning commission after all these years that you've been here at the city and it's, I haven't been here as many years as you have, but I could tell you that certainly you are the top of the cream of the crop when it comes to working with the planning commission, the city council to get things done and to accurately respond to our needs and to the community's needs. And that's a well done job. And I know you've heard this all from the city council. And so we're not going to belabor the good points of your glowing personality and esteem intelligence that you bring to your job every single day and to us every other week. But one thing I do want to know is from those of you who are here and Mr. Vandeline, who I see and see even raised his hand. I'd like to suggest we can maybe look at an evening or a Saturday or something that we can have Lori over someplace to have a dinner, which will give notice to the public that more than 3 of us will be at one spot. Of course, Lori makes 8, so that's, what can you say? Debbie makes 9. So, do we have any proposals for?
I know a place.
Good, well, good. We'll take you up on that part. And so,
I will make it work anytime. I'll be there.
go ahead, Nate.
I was just gonna say, I'll make it work too.
Do we want to do it on maybe, well, we could, how's April 8th look? Is that,
Oh,
that's not good.
that's not good for me. No.
Okay.
That's my birthday, so.
Oh, boy.
No. I don't want to take away from Lori.
Yeah, and I might just jump in that
Oh, I
actually.
know you're gonna jump in, but this is required event.
Well, if it's going to be a required event, we should think about doing it sooner rather than later, because after the 31st, which is my last day,
Yeah.
I have almost immediate plans.
Oh, you
So,
didn't leave us. Okay, so,
so I don't know. This is a very, very kind and generous offer, and I don't know that the timing will work, but anyway.
well, how about, the
27th is my birthday, so maybe not the 27th.
20, okay, I could do the 27th or 30th. How about everyone else?
30th works.
I can't do the 30th,
Can't do
but
the 30th?
30th, but I can do I can't do the 27th either, but
Oh, you can't do either one?
no. I can do the 28th, I can do the 29th, I can do the 25th, 26th.
And I'm not around on the 27th. So
29th,
I'm-
Wednesday.
Yeah,
29th would work better for me.
That works.
29th,
do that.
right?
Did that work for you?
It would work for me.
And then Derek and I will discuss location.
Yeah.
But I have a sneaking feeling where it's going to end,
Yeah,
which
Funny.
is
Me
just fine
too.
with me.
yeah.
So
Is there a time for the 29th that works?
what time would be good for you?
Probably, this will make me sound like an old lady, but probably earlier would be better, just because, you know, I actually don't live in Kenmore, so I will be driving home after, and so
Like 5? Is that what you mean by earlier?
earlier, yeah. Maybe not a dinner, but a time to,
Yeah, it can start at noon.
yeah.
Yeah, several of us could do that at
Yeah.
our
Ex-
older age.
I
So
would
5
suggest
o'clock, if that would
4 or
work for
5
you.
It
Okay,
works for me. I
so,
don't know. if it works
So
for
let's
everyone.
just recap that. So we're on Wednesday, March 29th at 5 o'clock at a place to be determined. And officially, we're providing public notice that the commission will be gathered to celebrate Lori's retirement and now any other business at a place to be determined starting 5 o'clock on Wednesday, March 29th.
Thank you very much.
And Debbie, you are invited. So, and,
Yes.
So,
So I hope that you probably did not, but if you listened to the city council meeting, when I made my remarks to the council, I really called out the work of the planning commission. You all are great. You are always prepared and you are thoughtful and you ask such good questions and you're fun. I have appreciated that over all of these years. And you do it all out of the goodness of your hearts, right? There's no compensation for all this work that you do. Nathan's recent comment about the 200 pages of the transportation element is telling about how much work you do. Anyway, I truly, truly have enjoyed working with you all and all the planning commissioners I've worked with over the last 14 years. It's really a pleasure in my job, has been. So
it's been a pleasure for us too.
Yes, certainly.
So Nathan, I think you would like to give her a little something. Now, this is from Nathan, not from all of
okay.
us. You're going to wait till get something from all of us.
Oh.
Welcome very much.
Oh,
Is
goodness.
there anything, Debbie, did you want to say anything at this moment?
No, not related to Lori. Well, Lori knows what I think, but just
Like Toto, right?
Just as a reminder for the next meetings that are coming up, which is April 4th, and that is John and consultant will be coming back with the final check-in on the transportation element. So that's on the 4th. And then the 18th and the 1st will be turning over to the climate action element. And I will be on vacation, so please be nice to Richard because he will be here as the staff person for the climate action. So that's all I have to say in terms of business.
All right. We should be able to move through that transportation element rather quickly. I would anticipate.
think so, yes.
Golf carts in there, man.
Yeah, you betcha we got the dairy golf carts. And so, you know, if you want to put a little something added in after that needs to kind of get things moving along. I really do believe that it's going to go pretty fast because we don't have a lot of, we talked about it. And I think those of us who have amendments are ready to deal with it.
Yeah, we're not going to be ready for the climate action on the 4th. So I don't know if there's any other elements that we could possibly, that will be ready to bring forward. So it might just be a very quick meeting.
Well, you can't say we did not offer.
I know, but I know you do need to have one last look at this and make sure that this is right because you've already had the public hearing. So this is the time for your recommendation. So if there's nothing else on the agenda, I'm sorry that you have to come for a very short meeting,
Okay.
but it will be productive, put it that way.
Okay, so is there anything for the good of the order? So the meeting for, nice to see you, Mike. So meeting for March 21st, 2023 is adjourned at 8:07 p.m.